It's a woman, standing in front of a painting that looks like it was made by a child. The comments flood in, mocking, ridiculing, and dismissing her work as nothing more than a joke. But what if I told you that this very painting, once the subject of online ridicule, ended up selling for thousands of dollars? This isn't just a story about art, it's a tale of perception, value, and the unpredictable nature of the art world. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can something so mocked be worth so much? It's a question that has puzzled art enthusiasts and collectors alike. But the answer lies in the complex relationship between an artist's intent, the audience's perception, and the market's demand. In the world of art, value isn't always determined by technical skill or traditional standards. Sometimes, it's about the story behind the piece, the emotions it evokes, and the conversations it sparks. A painting that challenges conventions or defies expectations can resonate with people in ways that a perfectly executed piece might not. Take, for instance, the story of an elderly woman in France who discovered a 13th-century masterpiece in her kitchen. The painting, Christ Mocked by Cimabue, had been hanging above her stove for years, unnoticed and unappreciated. When experts finally recognized its value, it sold for over 24 million euros, making it one of the most expensive medieval paintings ever sold. Sky News. +2. Market Realist. +2. The Guardian. +2. Wikipedia. +2. The Guardian. +2. Sky News. +2. This story serves as a reminder that value isn't always immediately apparent. What may seem insignificant today could be priceless tomorrow. The journey from mockery to millions is a testament to the unpredictable nature of art and its market. But what does this mean for the artist in our story? The one whose work was mocked and dismissed. It means that perseverance and belief in one's work can lead to unexpected success. It means that the art world is full of surprises, and sometimes, the most unlikely pieces can capture the public's imagination and command a high price. So, what happened to this artist? How did her mocked painting transform into a sought-after masterpiece? Stick around, because in the next part of this story, we'll delve into the journey of this painting, from ridicule to recognition, and explore the factors that contributed to its surprising success. Stay tuned, because the next chapter of this story might just change the way you view art forever. As we delve deeper into this story, the mystery surrounding the artist's journey from mockery to monetary success begins to unfold. The painting that was once the subject of ridicule now stands as a testament to the unpredictable nature of the art world. But how did this transformation occur? The artist, whom we'll refer to as Emily, had always been passionate about painting. Living in a small town in the Midwest, she often felt isolated in her artistic endeavors. Her work was unconventional, challenging traditional norms and pushing boundaries. This approach, however, did not sit well with everyone. Many critics dismissed her pieces as amateurish, lacking the finesse and technique expected in the art community. Despite the criticism, Emily remained steadfast in her vision. She believed that art should evoke emotion and provoke thought, rather than merely adhere to established standards. Her paintings were raw, unfiltered expressions of her inner world, capturing moments of vulnerability and strength. One particular piece, a vibrant abstract composition, garnered significant attention online. Initially, the reactions were overwhelmingly negative. Viewers mocked the piece, calling it a child's drawing and questioning its place in the art world. The comments were harsh, and Emily's confidence wavered. Financial Times. +1. WPDE. +1. But then, something unexpected happened. A well-known art critic stumbled upon the painting and saw something others had missed. He recognized the depth and emotion embedded in the strokes and colors, something that resonated with his own experiences. He wrote a glowing review, praising the piece for its authenticity and emotional power. This endorsement sparked a shift in perception. Collectors and galleries began to take notice, intrigued by the newfound acclaim. Emily's work was no longer dismissed, it was sought after. The painting that had once been mocked was now displayed in prestigious galleries and sold for thousands of dollars. au.aruli.com. +1. The Family Office. +1. But the journey didn't end there. Emily's rise to fame attracted attention from various quarters. Some admired her resilience and artistic vision, while others questioned the sudden surge in her popularity. Whispers of favoritism and insider connections began to circulate, casting a shadow over her success. Amidst the accolades and controversies, Emily remained focused on her art. She continued to create pieces that challenged perceptions and sparked dialogue. Her story became a symbol of perseverance and the unpredictable nature of the art world, where value is often determined not by technique alone, but by the emotions and stories a piece conveys. As we continue to explore Emily's journey, we uncover more layers of intrigue and complexity. The art world is not just about paintings and prices, it's about perception, relationships, and the narratives we construct around creativity. Emily's story is a testament to the power of belief in oneself and the transformative potential of art. Stay tuned as we delve further into the twists and turns of Emily's artistic journey, uncovering the forces that shaped her path and the mysteries that continue to surround her rise to prominence. Just when Emily began to feel the ground beneath her stabilizing, as though all the doubt and judgment were finally giving way to validation, things started to shift again, this time in ways that were harder to explain. It all began with a phone call late one evening. The gallery that had just agreed to feature her painting in their upcoming showcase contacted her in a rush of confusion. The piece, the same one that sparked the internet outrage and then flipped into a viral sensation, had vanished from their secure storage room. No signs of forced entry, no surveillance footage showing anything out of the ordinary. Just gone. The director, sounding flustered and unusually guarded, assured her that they would handle it internally, but something in his tone felt off, almost rehearsed. Emily tried to ask questions, but he ended the call quickly and never followed up. Suddenly, the painting that had become the symbol of her turning point was now missing without explanation. Not long after that, Emily started receiving cryptic messages in her DMs. Most were vague, almost poetic warnings, sometimes the truth stains more than paint ever could, or let your brush stop now, before they make you. At first, she brushed them off as trolls looking to stir up drama, which was common enough on trending YouTube stories and viral TikTok controversies. But then the messages became more personal, referencing things no one outside her inner circle would know. Her anxiety grew, and with it, a gnawing sense that someone was deliberately trying to shake her. Or worse, trying to silence her. That's when she remembered something that hadn't made sense at the time but was now beginning to feel too important to ignore. A few weeks earlier, an older woman had approached her at a local art walk and complimented her painting, but with a strange intensity. She said, "Some art opens doors, but not all of them should be opened." Emily remembered how cold her eyes were, how her smile never reached them. Emily's closest friend, Jonah, who had always supported her work even when no one else would, started acting distant around this time too. She couldn't pin it down exactly. He still showed up to her events and sent supportive texts, but something in his demeanor had changed. He was more guarded, hesitant in his words, and no longer brought up her success with the same excitement. One night, over coffee, she asked him directly if something was going on. He paused, almost said something, then just smiled and said he was tired. It left her unsettled. A part of her trusted Jonah completely. After all, he had been with her since her early days, painting in her garage with nothing but leftover supplies and a dream. But now, even he seemed like a question mark. Could someone close to her be involved? Could Jonah be hiding something? Determined to get answers, Emily started digging into the gallery's past. She found scattered rumors on Reddit art threads and anonymous Twitter posts hinting at shady dealings and questionable curatorial practices, though nothing concrete enough to act on. Still, the deeper she looked, the more she found herself circling around a name she hadn't thought about in years: Alec Corbin, a former instructor from her college days. Alec was once a celebrated artist himself, until his career took a nosedive after a scandal involving stolen work. He had been forced out quietly, and while Emily had never been directly involved, she remembered that he had shown an unusual interest in her early work. They had only spoken a few times, but each conversation felt loaded with something unspoken. And now, with her piece gone, her trusted friend acting strange, and online whispers tying her rising fame to a gallery with buried secrets, Emily couldn't help but feel like she was being pushed toward something, some truth no one wanted her to see. Was her success truly her own, or had someone else orchestrated it for a darker reason? And if so, why? The question hung heavy in her mind as she opened her inbox one morning to find a subject line that made her blood run cold: "You don't know who really painted it." Inside, a single image, a photo of her painting, but it was dated 3 years before she'd ever created it. Now Emily had to ask herself the one question she never thought she'd need to: was the painting that changed her life really hers at all? What do you think happened to the missing painting, and who might be behind it? Emily sat frozen, staring at the image on her screen, the timestamp on the bottom corner refusing to let her look away. The colors, the strokes, even the odd smudge near the lower right corner, it was unmistakably her painting. But the date on the photo was a full 3 years before she had ever touched a brush to canvas for that particular piece. Panic gave way to a crawling unease, the kind that doesn't scream but whispers just loud enough to keep you awake at night. Her first instinct was to think it had to be a mistake, maybe some elaborate prank pulled by a jealous rival or an opportunistic troll riding the wave of her newfound visibility. Yet deep down, she knew something wasn't adding up, and now she was tangled in something much bigger than she ever expected when she first posted her art online. Just as she was about to forward the image to Jonah, hoping that maybe his practical mind could see something she was missing, her phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Lena, an old art school friend she hadn't spoken to in months. The moment Emily picked up, Lena's voice came through low and shaky, full of confusion and fear. She had received a package that morning with no return address, just her name scrawled in black marker across the front. Inside was a printed photo of a different painting, one that Lena had created back in college as part of a collaborative project with Emily. But here's the strange part: the piece wasn't supposed to exist anymore. They had destroyed it after a messy falling out with a third student, Devin, who accused them both of stealing his concept. It had all ended in a haze of bitterness and accusations, and the painting was supposedly burned that night behind the art building in a makeshift bonfire they all agreed to forget. Now, not only did the painting still exist, but the package also included a USB drive with a single video file. Emily and Lena watched it together on a shared video call, their eyes wide as the footage played out in grainy resolution. It was surveillance footage, clearly secret, clearly old. It showed someone wheeling a cart down the back hallway of their college's art department late at night, and on that cart was their painting, partially covered with a sheet. The figure was hard to identify, the footage too pixelated, but the outline bore an eerie resemblance to Alec Corbin. He had always been around the studio at odd hours, and now the connection seemed less coincidental. This wasn't just a story about one painting anymore. Someone had been keeping tabs on them for years. Someone had preserved what should have been destroyed. But why? As Emily tried to process it all, Lena hesitated, then revealed something else, something she'd never told anyone. After Alec's dismissal from the college, she had continued meeting with him privately. At the time, she said it was for guidance, for feedback on her portfolio, but it had gotten more complicated. He spoke often about authenticity, about how artists like her and Emily didn't really understand the value of what they had. She never knew exactly what he meant, but now it rang with a sinister tone. He had once made a cryptic comment during one of those meetings: "Real art doesn't belong to the creator, it belongs to the one who sees the truth in it first." Emily's thoughts raced. Could Alec have stolen their work and passed it off elsewhere? Could the painting she believed was her original masterpiece be something built off an idea that had been manipulated, reshaped, and reframed to appear as hers? And if so, how far back did this deception go? The questions piled higher, yet no answers came. They needed help, but who could they trust when even their own memories seemed questionable? Meanwhile, the buzz around Emily's art was exploding. Her name was trending on YouTube and Twitter again, this time not just for her controversial rise, but because a popular creator had picked up the story. A content sleuth known for deep diving into art industry scandals had made a viral TikTok speculating that Emily's success might be connected to a long-buried forgery ring. The video already had over 1 million views, and the comment section was a war zone, half the viewers calling her a fraud, the other half defending her authenticity and accusing the gallery of exploiting young talent. The pressure was suffocating, but it was also a clue. Someone was pushing this narrative out into the public now. Someone wanted chaos. But was it to expose the truth, or to hide it behind a storm of noise? As Emily scrolled through the chaos online, she noticed something else. An anonymous account had left the same exact comment under every video, every post, every tweet about her situation. It was just one sentence, repeated like a mantra. It was never about the painting, it was about who paid for it first. Emily read it again, and again, until the words lost meaning and then gained a terrifying one. Somewhere out there, hidden behind fake smiles and old friendships, was a truth no one wanted her to find. And someone, maybe more than one, was willing to bury it deeper than she'd ever imagined. What could be so valuable about that painting? And what secret was it hiding all along? Emily had always thought of herself as someone grounded, someone who might get overwhelmed, yes, but not someone prone to paranoia. Yet over the last few days, the world around her had shifted into something she could no longer explain or rationalize. The weight of the mystery wasn't just intellectual now, it had curled its fingers around her life, touching everything she once thought was stable. She started noticing strange things, little details that might have gone unnoticed if not for the constant hum of dread now living in the back of her mind. First, it was the parked car outside her apartment complex, the dark blue sedan with tinted windows that seemed to always be there morning, noon, and night. Then came the feeling that someone was watching her when she walked to her car, when she opened her front door, even while she was inside painting. At first, she told herself she was imagining it, that the stress of the situation was getting the better of her, but that illusion shattered one night when she came home to find her front door ajar, though she remembered locking it. Nothing was taken. Nothing was out of place. But on her kitchen table sat a single paintbrush. Not hers. A different brand entirely, one she hadn't used in years. She called Jonah immediately, her hands shaking as she recounted what had happened. He didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her voice rising with each word, until finally it cracked. An hour passed, then two. Finally, she received a text, just a single line that made her blood run cold. "Don't try to find me." It was from Jonah, but it didn't feel like him. No explanation, no reassurance, no sense of the friend who had stood by her since the beginning. She called again. Straight to voicemail. She checked his social media. Nothing posted in over a day. The last message he'd sent her, before going silent, was a link to an article about a lawsuit involving the gallery that had first displayed her painting. Buried in the comments of the article was an anonymous claim that certain pieces had been part of a laundering operation, art bought and sold not for value, but for what they were hiding beneath the canvas. Jonah had hinted before that something felt off about the gallery's involvement, but she'd never pushed. Now she was starting to realize that maybe he'd been trying to protect her from something much bigger, something that had finally caught up to him. That night, she didn't sleep. Her phone buzzed every so often, push notifications from Twitter, mentions in YouTube comment threads, videos speculating on what had really happened to her missing painting. Trending hashtags like #Artgate and #StolenCanvasTheory were flooding every platform. The worst part was seeing her own face plastered across thumbnails with titles like "Did She Lie About It All?" and "The Dark Side of Viral Fame." People were digging through her past, making assumptions, twisting her story into something she no longer recognized. But even that chaos felt less terrifying than the silence surrounding Jonah. By morning, she had called everyone she could think of, his sister, his co-workers, even an ex he hadn't spoken to in years, but no one knew where he was. No one had seen him since the night before. Then came the package. No return address, just like the one Lena had received, but this one wasn't mailed, it had been slid under her front door. Inside, a single photograph. It was of Emily, taken from a distance, walking through the park near her studio 2 days ago. She remembered the day clearly because she had stopped to sketch for an hour, needing a break from everything unraveling around her. She remembered the breeze, the quiet, how safe she had felt in that moment. And yet someone had been watching her. Someone close enough to photograph her without her ever noticing. Her breath caught in her throat as she noticed something else. Scribbled in red marker across the bottom of the photo were 5 words, "You painted more than art." Her mind reeled, trying to make sense of it. Was it a threat? A warning? A clue? Had something been hidden in her work, something she didn't know about? A memory clawed its way to the surface, something she hadn't thought about in years, A late night in her college studio, a half-finished canvas, Alec Corbin watching from the doorway, asking strange questions about the symbolism in her piece. She had dismissed him then, thinking he was just being provocative. But what if he saw something she hadn't? What if someone had been using her art for purposes she couldn't begin to comprehend? Emily's world was cracking. Every piece of her past now felt like a puzzle that had been misassembled, every person she trusted a potential player in something darker than she could admit to herself. And through it all, the questions only grew louder. Where was Jonah? Why had Lena's painting resurfaced? What was the gallery hiding? And most of all, what had she unknowingly become a part of? Because whatever this was, it wasn't just about art anymore. It was about power, control. And someone, somewhere, was making sure the truth stayed buried. But what exactly was the truth, and how far was she willing to go to uncover it? It happened on a grey, drizzling afternoon that seemed like it had already made up its mind to be forgettable until it wasn't. Emily, now living in a strange rhythm of paranoia and scattered hope, was scrolling through an old backup drive from her college years, trying to find anything that could explain the message scrawled across the photo left at her door. She had looked at hundreds of images, digital sketches, archived concept notes from school, and nothing had stood out. But just as she was about to shut her laptop, a folder flickered into view. It was titled Studio D, a name that didn't immediately ring a bell. Inside were a few grainy video files, no thumbnails, just numerical labels. She clicked the first one, and what played wasn't a class project or critique, it was surveillance footage. But not of a hallway or a gallery. It was her. Her, standing in front of her easel late one night in the school studio. The camera was hidden behind a bookshelf, angled perfectly to watch her every move. She froze, her breath catching. This was not some art school security cam. This was personal. Someone had been filming her. She watched the rest of the footage in silence, the cold sinking into her bones. Each file was dated, time-stamped, covering multiple nights across several months. Always her, always working alone, unaware. As she reached the final clip, a voice suddenly cut in, not hers, but familiar. It was Alec Corbin. His voice was low, but clear. They think they're creating art, but what they don't know is, they're preserving evidence. Emily recoiled from the screen as if it had burned her. Her mind reeled. What evidence? What had they used her art to hide? Before she could begin to process it, her phone rang. Lena. She sounded breathless, panicked, as though she'd been holding something in too long and was finally letting it erupt. She admitted she had lied about her last meeting with Alec. It hadn't happened years ago. It happened just 2 weeks ago. And she hadn't gone to him for guidance. She had gone because she needed to confess. Back in college, during their collaborative project, Lena had discovered something hidden inside one of the canvases they had been using, something she refused to describe over the phone. All she would say was that it wasn't hers, or Emily's, but it was powerful enough to make Alec force her into silence. He told her if she ever spoke about it, her career would never survive. And then, after all these years, he came back into her life, not as a mentor, but as a warning. And now, she feared Jonah's disappearance might be connected to what she never revealed. Emily demanded to know what had been in the painting, but Lena only whispered, it wasn't paint. It was memory. Then the line went dead. Completely rattled, Emily did the only thing she could think to do. She drove to the storage unit where she kept her oldest work. It had been years since she'd looked at those pieces, but something in her gut told her the answers weren't in the new paintings, or the viral one that had vanished, they were buried in the beginnings. She dug through piles of canvases, sketches, forgotten frames until she found it. An unfinished painting. One she didn't even remember completing. But tucked into the back of the frame was something that stopped her cold, a torn photo. It showed Alec, younger, smiling next to a group of unknown men in suits. But one of the faces was instantly recognizable, Jonah. The photo looked old, like it had been taken a decade ago. But Jonah had never mentioned knowing Alec, not once. Not in college, not after. And then it hit her, what if Jonah hadn't been trying to protect her from the mystery? What if he had been part of it the whole time? What if his sudden disappearance wasn't because he was in danger, But because the game had shifted and he could no longer maintain the lie, everything she thought she knew crumbled. Jonah's loyalty, Lena's silence, Alex's interest, it wasn't about her talent, or even her painting. It was about what they were hiding, what they had used her art to conceal, and the story they had told her to keep her in the dark. Her rise to fame wasn't an accident, it was a cover. And the worst part? She still didn't know what they were covering up. But someone did. And they were getting closer. The next morning, Emily didn't wake up so much as she jolted into consciousness. Sleep had barely touched her, and the fragments she did get were dark, twisted nightmares, half-truths and shadowy figures watching her paint in an endless loop. The photo of Jonah with Alec haunted her more than anything else. It made her stomach twist with a nauseating mix of betrayal, confusion, and grief. She had loved Jonah not romantically, but with the deep, sacred kind of love reserved for people you trust to hold your life story in their hands. He had been there before the attention, before the cameras, before the viral success. She thought he had stayed because he believed in her. But now she couldn't be sure if he was ever really on her side or if he had just been watching, steering, making sure she followed the script. The decision to confront him wasn't made lightly, but after hours of scouring old messages and digging through every trace of his online life, she found a clue. A bank statement he had emailed her years ago when they were helping each other through a budgeting crisis. She remembered it because they'd both laughed at how broke they were back then. But what she hadn't noticed until now was a recurring deposit from a consulting agency linked to a defunct non-profit, the same one Alec had supposedly volunteered with after leaving the college. She had never connected those dots before, but now it stared her in the face. She didn't know where Jonah was, but she had a hunch. And she had to take it, even if it meant risking everything. That afternoon, she drove 2 hours out of the city to a place Jonah once mentioned during a late-night road trip, when they were still dreaming big and hoping someone would one day care about their work. He said it was where he went when everything felt too heavy, a cabin on the edge of an old orchard that belonged to his uncle, long abandoned. She found it almost exactly how he described it: faded paint, rusting hinges, wild ivy climbing up the sides. And sure enough, parked just beyond the trees was that same dark blue sedan that had been outside her apartment. The confrontation wasn't explosive like she'd imagined. It was quiet, tense. When he stepped out onto the porch, he didn't even look surprised. He looked tired, like someone who had been carrying a secret so long, the weight of it had started breaking him down. She held up the photo. She didn't ask him if it was real. She asked him why. Jonah didn't deny it. Instead, he broke in a way she'd never seen before, voice cracking, eyes watering, hands shaking as he admitted what she feared most. He had been involved from the beginning, back in college, when Alec had approached a few promising students to help test a theory. Jonah said he didn't know the full picture, only that Alec had a vision. He believed that certain people, certain artists, could be subconsciously guided to produce imagery that resonated on a deeper, almost neurological level. It wasn't about the painting, it was about what the painting could trigger in others. Memories. Emotions. Guilt. Jonah insisted that Emily had always been more than a test subject to him, but it didn't matter. He had lied. He had watched her grow and suffer and question her sanity without once telling her the truth. Then came the ultimatum. Jonah told her that someone had reached out, someone high up, not Alec this time, but another name Emily didn't recognize. They had offered her an out. If she agreed to let the painting go, to stop digging, to stop asking questions, to sign a document that discredited the recent online theories, she would be protected. No more surveillance. No more threats. She could keep her fame, her growing career, even her gallery connections. Everything would continue as if nothing had happened. But if she refused, if she pushed forward, the consequences wouldn't stop with her. They knew about Lena. They had eyes on her family. They had leverage. Standing there on that porch, Emily had never felt more lost. She could end it all, pretend she never found the video files, never saw the photo, never received the package. She could lie and move on, let the world believe whatever it wanted to believe, let her name become a hashtag, a brand. Or she could burn it all down. She could risk everything to expose the truth, but in doing so, she might put others in the same danger she barely understood herself. Her hands trembled as she stared Jonah down, part of her desperate to believe there was still good in him. But trust wasn't something she could afford anymore. Her story had become something she no longer controlled, and now the only way forward was through a path lined with questions she might never get to answer fully. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She turned and walked away, knowing that with every step, she was choosing the truth, whatever it cost. But what she didn't know yet was that the real secret, the one that started it all, wasn't in the painting. It was in her. The silence after Emily left the cabin didn't last long. Her phone rang before she even reached the highway, and when she answered, it wasn't a voice she recognized, it was distorted, filtered through some kind of scrambler, emotionless and detached. The voice simply said, "You were warned," before hanging up. A chill slid down her spine, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was something colder, something sharper. She had made her choice back at that porch, not because she was brave, but because every lie she had been fed had left her with nothing else to hold on to. If they wanted her to stop, they should have hidden the truth better. Now she wasn't walking away. She was going straight into the fire. In the days that followed, everything unraveled faster than she could hold together. Lena's apartment was broken into, but nothing was taken. Her studio was vandalized, not with destruction but with eerie precision, each of her canvases slashed down the middle, as though someone was trying to silence her work piece by piece. The media, now ablaze with speculation thanks to the viral TikTok and dozens of reaction videos, had painted her as both victim and villain. Trending searches like "Is Emily fake?" and "Artgate Truth Revealed" were pulling in millions of views. She watched strangers dissect her life on live streams, combing through every social post she'd ever made, every sketch she'd ever shared, all trying to spot the moment the deception began. And she couldn't even blame them. The worst part was she wasn't sure herself when her story had stopped being her own. But then, buried in the chaos, came the moment that pulled the curtain back. It was a file. Sent to her anonymously through a secure email address. The subject line read, "For when you're ready." Inside was a bundle of documents, contracts, transcripts, digital scans of internal memos from a group called the Foundation for Cognitive Impact. Emily had never heard of it before. But the more she read, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about Alec. It wasn't just about Jonah. The Foundation had been operating quietly for decades, funding experimental projects through academic institutions, particularly art schools and psychological research labs. Their goal wasn't just to discover how art influenced the human mind, it was to manipulate it. And she had been one of their most successful subjects. Her work had sparked unusually strong emotional responses in focus groups without her ever knowing she was part of one. Her viral painting hadn't gone viral by accident, it had been placed, promoted, fed into algorithmic patterns controlled by bots and fake accounts. The outrage, the praise, the critics, even the initial mocking, it was all curated. Engineered to see how far an image could travel and how deeply it could embed into the public psyche. She wasn't just the artist. She was the experiment. As she scrolled further through the documents, she found other names. Names of fellow students from her college. Names of influencers, gallery owners, even therapists she'd once seen through her university's wellness program. Some were participants. Some were watchers. One name, though, made her hands go numb. Lena. She had been listed not just as a subject, but as a collaborator. Emily reread the line a dozen times, unable to make sense of it, until it hit her like a wave. Lena had known all along. The confessions, the fear, the cryptic warnings, had they been a game? Or had Lena been trying to break free in her own way, shackled to the same invisible leash? She drove to Lena's apartment that night without telling anyone, her mind a riot of betrayal and disbelief. She expected to find her gone, or worse. But Lena answered the door, eyes hollow, as if she'd been waiting. Inside, the air was heavy with silence and the weight of a truth too long buried. Emily held up the document with Lena's name. No words were needed. Lena broke down, sobbing into her hands, and finally told her everything. She had been recruited during their second year, offered grant money and mentorship in exchange for access to Emily's work and daily routines. At first, she thought it was harmless research, development, art psychology. Then it escalated. They asked her to record conversations, track emotional patterns in Emily's painting habits, report shifts in her behavior. By the time she realized how deep it went, it was too late. They threatened her future, her career, her family. So she stayed quiet, played along, and lived with the guilt. When Emily's painting took off and the chaos started, Lena thought it was her chance to come clean. But even that had been calculated. They let her confess just enough to maintain control, just enough to keep Emily chasing shadows while the real operation continued unchecked. Emily's rage boiled to the surface, not just for the betrayal but for the sheer scale of the manipulation. Every choice she had made, every moment she thought was her own, guided, structured, filmed, engineered. Her life was content before she even knew it was a story. But now that story had gone off script. She told Lena she didn't care about the consequences anymore. She was going to bring it all into the light, every name, every document, every piece of art used in their twisted experiment. She didn't know if it would stop them. She didn't know if it would make a difference. But for the first time since her painting went viral, she finally felt something real. Then, just before she left, Lena whispered one more thing. There were more like Emily. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. People who didn't even know their minds had been molded, their art weaponized, their lives steered toward impact. It wasn't just her story. It was a system. And someone was still pulling the strings. Because going viral was never the goal. It was just the beginning. The city felt colder that night, not from the temperature, but from the weight pressing down on Emily as she walked through the gallery's back entrance for the first time in weeks. The once bright space, where her painting had once stood under perfect lighting and curious eyes, was now shuttered, silent, and eerily stripped down. It had been closed for renovations, according to the official statement, but Emily knew the truth now. It had served its purpose. The building itself was a shell, a front. Everything that mattered had happened behind closed doors, in dim corridors and unmarked offices, orchestrated by people who'd used her creativity as a tool for something far more calculated. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from something closer to resolve. In her bag was the final piece, an encrypted hard drive she'd recovered from Jonah's cabin, stashed beneath a loose floorboard. The files it held weren't just records, they were blueprints. Psychological profiles. Algorithms tracking how her art influenced neural responses in test audiences, reports signed by names she recognized from her past, and one name she never expected to see at the top. Professor Adrienne Holloway. Holloway had been her mentor, the one who encouraged her to enter the gallery show that first launched her viral painting, the one who had told her that her work spoke to something deeper. And now, Emily understood just how literal that was. It wasn't praise. It was assessment. Holloway had been watching from the very beginning, not as a supporter, but as one of the architects of the very machine Emily was now determined to dismantle. She made her way to the basement, where the Foundation's private office had been hidden for years under the guise of archival storage. The keypad at the door had been changed, but Emily had found the code buried in one of the emails she decrypted, 4 digits tied to a date burned into her memory, the day her painting went viral. The room inside wasn't large, but it was suffocating. Shelves lined with hard drives, rows of labeled art pieces stacked like forgotten relics, and in the center, a desk where Holloway sat, calm and unreadable, as if she had been expecting her all along. Emily didn't speak right away. She wanted to look her in the eye, to see if any hint of guilt lived there. But Holloway's face was smooth, rehearsed. "I assume you've come to return the drive," she said, motioning calmly to the seat across from her, like they were just having a conversation about curriculum. Emily didn't sit. She demanded answers, not about her painting, but about the people whose names were buried in the files. Students like her. Strangers who had been studied, manipulated, and discarded. The way Holloway responded was the final confirmation Emily needed. She didn't deny it. She explained it, clinically, like it was all inevitable. "Emotion is data, Emily. Your generation trades in it like currency. We simply tracked the flow. You wanted your work to matter. It did, more than you know." Emily stepped forward and dropped the drive onto the desk, its metal shell clicking hard against the surface. "It's all here," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "And when this goes public, so will you." Holloway smiled, just barely. "And who do you think they'll believe? A traumatized artist caught in her own hype spiral, or a tenured researcher with years of peer-reviewed credibility. You've been branded already. Whatever you say now will just sound like an artist unraveling under the pressure of fame. It should have broken Emily. Maybe weeks ago it would have. But not now. Because what Holloway didn't know was that the files were already out. While Emily had come to confront her, Lena had uploaded the entire cache to a decentralized server, backed by an anonymous whistleblower group who'd already begun distributing copies to major investigative journalists, underground forums, and data leak activists. And the moment Emily stepped into that office, the live stream had started, quietly, invisibly, broadcasting everything Holloway said to a growing audience across multiple platforms. The confrontation was real-time content now, fed into the same systems the Foundation had once used to manipulate the public. Emily had turned their own weapon against them. But just as she started to feel that small spark of triumph, the twist came not from Holloway, but from the corner of the room, where someone else stepped forward. Jonah. He wasn't gone. He hadn't disappeared. He had been working with Holloway all along. The photo hadn't been a relic of the past, it had been a clue she had misread. Jonah hadn't just observed her. He had recruited her. He was the reason she had made it into that gallery. The calls, the concern, even his disappearance, it had all been part of the script, part of the control. And now he looked at her with something between regret and acceptance. You weren't supposed to go this far, he said quietly. You were supposed to choose the deal. We gave you the option to walk away. Emily's heart cracked in that moment. Not because he'd betrayed her, that pain had already come, but because she had truly believed she was alone against something massive. And now she realized she'd been surrounded all along. But even surrounded, she was no longer powerless. She looked back at Holloway, at Jonah, at the tangled web they had built around her and others like her, and she said the words that would cement her place in the unraveling: it's too late. They're watching now. All of them. And with that, the illusion shattered. Sirens wailed in the distance as police cars and media vans swarmed outside. The live stream had triggered a cascade of consequences, digital fingerprints unraveling years of buried connections. Holloway's name would hit headlines before morning. Jonah's face would be clipped into conspiracy documentaries and reaction videos for years. But the story wasn't over. Because just as she turned to leave, her phone vibrated with a new message from a number she didn't recognize. The text was short, terrifying in its implication: you weren't the first. And you're still not the last. The system had been exposed, but it wasn't gone. And somewhere, someone else's painting had just gone viral. In the weeks that followed, the world shifted, not dramatically, not all at once, but in those quiet, subtle ways that only become clear when you stop and look at what's no longer the same. The gallery shut down permanently, with its owners quietly distancing themselves from Professor Adrian Holloway and the Foundation for Cognitive Impact, despite years of affiliation. Academic circles went into overdrive, publicly denouncing Holloway's research as unethical while privately scrambling to scrub records of their involvement. News outlets picked up the story in pieces, filtered through the chaos of trending hashtags like #ArtGateExposed, #Hidden Brushstrokes, and #Mind Manipulation. And yet, just as quickly as it erupted, it began to fade, overwhelmed by the next controversy, the next viral moment, the next distraction. Emily had expected this. She knew truth alone wasn't enough to break the system. But she also knew it was a start. For a while, she stayed offline. Not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet sense of someone reclaiming space that had been taken from her. She deleted the apps, stopped checking the comments, let her name cycle out of the recommended tab on YouTube. The painting that had sparked everything was never recovered. Its fate, like so much else, remained a mystery. But Emily didn't need it anymore. It was never about the art itself, it was about the way it had been used, shaped, weaponized by people who saw creativity not as expression, but as leverage. She returned to painting, not for an audience, not for the algorithm, but for herself. The colors were darker now, the strokes sharper, but there was truth in them. And that was something she hadn't felt in a long time. Lena, after everything, disappeared again, not out of guilt, but perhaps out of exhaustion. The last message she sent Emily was a photo of a beach somewhere distant, no caption, just the horizon blurring into sky. It was enough. There were no apologies, no dramatic farewells. Just the quiet understanding between two people who had both been used and broken in different ways. Jonah, on the other hand, was arrested along with Holloway, but his case was already wrapped in legal ambiguity. Rumors swirled about a deal he struck behind closed doors. Some claimed he gave up higher names in exchange for leniency. Others believed he vanished into witness protection. Emily never looked into it. Some ghosts are better left in the past. The files she leaked stayed online, archived by groups dedicated to digital transparency, dissected in conspiracy forums, referenced in think pieces, even adapted into a documentary that hit Netflix under the title Framed, The Painting That Broke the Web. Emily watched it once, alone, and found herself both detached and strangely moved by seeing her life through someone else's lens. They got most of it right. But they missed the part that mattered most, the way it changed her. Not just the betrayal or the fear, but the strange, hollow clarity that came after. When everything had fallen apart, what remained was simple: her art, her truth, and the uneasy knowledge that what had happened to her could easily happen to someone else. And it did. She saw it in a video that popped up one night, unprompted, in the recommended section of her clean, algorithm-free browser. A young artist, barely out of school, talking about a piece she'd made that had unexpectedly gone viral. The story sounded all too familiar, mocked at first, then celebrated. Media attention. Sudden gallery interest. A professor in the background offering guidance. Emily didn't click on it. She just stared at the thumbnail for a long time, the artist's face lit by the glow of creation, unaware of what might be watching from behind the scenes. Emily now lived on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by quiet woods and early morning fog. She painted every day, some days with fury, other days with peace. She never tried to go viral again. She never tried to make a statement. But in her latest collection, hidden under layers of abstract shapes and deep blues, were embedded symbols, fragments, clues. Not overt. Not loud. Just enough that if someone was looking, truly looking, they might begin to see the pattern. It was her way of keeping the truth alive, not as a warning, but as an echo. A whisper for those who might one day find themselves in her place, caught between expression and exploitation. The world kept scrolling. But her story had been told. And somewhere, beneath the noise, it was still being heard. Have you ever thought about what would happen if the most private parts of your life, your innermost thoughts, were suddenly exposed to the world? Imagine you're out on a peaceful walk, just minding your own business, and for some reason, you leave behind something. Maybe you forget your phone or your bag, but this wasn't just any ordinary thing you left behind. It was something that held your secrets, your fears, your dreams. And someone found it. The twist? That someone didn't just keep it to themselves. They published it. You might be wondering, who would do such a thing? And why? Stick with me for a moment because by the end of this video, you'll have the answer. But first, let me tell you about the story of Emma, a young woman with an unassuming life, yet with a journal that carried the weight of her thoughts. This is a story that goes beyond the written word. It's about trust, betrayal, and how a single mistake can turn everything upside down. I know you're curious now. You want to know what happens next, don't you? Well, I'm about to take you on a journey that will leave you on the edge of your seat, questioning everything you thought you knew about privacy, and maybe even yourself. Picture this: Emma, a quiet, introverted artist, had always found solace in her journal. Every page was filled with her musings about life, love, and the struggles she faced every day. It was her escape, her way of dealing with the overwhelming world around her. She never expected anyone to see what was written in those pages. After all, they were just words, scribbles that only she could fully understand. But one fateful afternoon, as she sat on a park bench near the city's heart, something unexpected happened. She placed her journal beside her while she took a call, just a few moments of distraction, but that brief lapse in attention would come at a great cost. When she returned, the bench was empty, her journal nowhere in sight. It should have been a simple loss. But what followed wasn't simple at all. Someone found the journal, and they did not just read it, they published it. Every intimate detail, every vulnerable moment, was laid bare for the entire world to see. Now, you're probably thinking, Why wouldn't they just keep it to themselves? Who would do something like that? You're not alone in asking that. It's a question that haunts Emma's every waking moment. And, trust me, this is just the beginning of something much bigger. But before we dive into how this happened and who did it, I want you to take a second and think about something. If your private thoughts, the ones you've kept locked away from everyone, even your closest friends and family, suddenly became public knowledge, how would that make you feel? Would you be angry? Humiliated? Empowered? We live in a world where privacy is becoming increasingly scarce. Social media, constant connectivity, and the pressure to be on all the time has made our personal lives feel like an open book. But imagine having a piece of your soul, something so deeply personal and private, stolen from you and exposed to the public without your consent. That's what Emma faced when her journal was published. But who was behind it? Why would someone do such a thing? Was it for revenge? Was it for fame? Or was it something more sinister? The consequences of this betrayal didn't just affect Emma, they reached into every corner of her life. Her relationships, her career, even her sense of self, all of it was shaken to its core. And as she tried to put the pieces of her life back together, something even more shocking came to light. The person who published her journal wasn't a stranger. No, they were someone she knew. Someone she trusted. And that, my friends, is the heart of the mystery you're about to uncover. But don't think for a second that you have all the answers yet. I know you're sitting there, eager to figure out who did this and why, but this story has many layers, and we're only scratching the surface. So, stay with me, because we're going to peel back each layer together. As we dig deeper into the story, you'll come to understand that the act of betrayal wasn't the only shock Emma had to endure. The world's reaction to her journal's publication would leave her questioning not only her own judgment but also the very nature of human connection and trust. You see, once her journal was out in the world, things took an unexpected turn. People started to react. Some sympathized with Emma, others ridiculed her, and a few even felt inspired by her words. What was once a deeply personal collection of thoughts became a viral sensation. Emma became both a victim and an unwilling symbol of something much bigger than herself. Her pain, her struggles, and her triumphs were dissected, analyzed, and debated by thousands. But there was more to the story than just a journal. The question isn't just about who published it, but why they published it and how they were able to manipulate the world's perception of Emma in ways she never thought possible. By now, I know you're asking yourself, how does this all connect? What is the real story here? Hang tight, because we're about to uncover the truth together. As we dive deeper, you'll start to see how this betrayal not only shattered Emma's life but also changed the way we think about privacy in the digital age. This isn't just Emma's story, it's a reflection of the challenges we all face when it comes to protecting our own vulnerabilities in a world where nothing is truly private anymore. In the next part of the video, I'm going to reveal more about the aftermath of this betrayal and how it forced Emma to face the harsh reality that her journal wasn't just a collection of personal thoughts, it was a ticking time bomb. The world's reaction to her story was the catalyst for a chain of events that would leave her questioning everything she thought she knew about herself and the people around her. So, stick around. You're going to want to see what happens next. Trust me, you haven't even scratched the surface yet. The twist is coming, and it will change everything. Don't go anywhere, the truth is waiting for you. The events that led Emma to that park bench weren't as innocent as they might initially seem. To understand why she was so vulnerable, we need to rewind a little, back to the days leading up to the journal's disappearance. Emma had always been a quiet soul, someone who preferred the comfort of her small studio apartment over the chaos of social gatherings. But even someone like her can't escape the currents of life entirely. Recently, she had been navigating a particularly difficult chapter. Her art, which had always been a form of therapy, had suddenly started to feel like a reflection of her personal struggles. Her work wasn't connecting with her audience the way it once did, and the creative block she was experiencing seemed to mirror everything she was feeling inside, a deep sense of isolation, confusion, and frustration.